Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Jiang, for a very, very nice and warm introduction. And let me share my slide. Yeah, I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see it clearly.
Yes, thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. I'm now just arrived at Manila, Philippines. And although Philippines are one of the hardest hit countries, but actually January, February in Manila, no rain and no heat wave, and it's not nicest weather to visit Manila. So I'm going to make a presentation from Manila talking about rural markets and government and communities in order to build up disaster resilience. So that's my topic. And actually, as Professor Zhang kindly introduced, I have been working on disaster-related topics from economic side in last more than 25 years. And so this lecture is kind of compiling different pieces of my past research into one unified topic. So three things I'd like to share with you. First is a market state and community mechanism in different type of resource allocation. And secondly, I'd like to shift the gear to disasters. And then towards the end, I'd like to share some empirical evidence based on my field studies and broader empirical studies. So market states and community mechanisms. So three different type of resource allocation mechanisms. First, I'd like to emphasize, as an economist, probably, market mechanism has been very, very strong resource allocation mechanism. For example, late Professor John Macmillan of Stanford published a book titled Reinventing the Bazaar, basically talking about role of market mechanism in different settings. Even Rwandan refugee camps in Democratic Republic of Congo or prisoners of war camps during World War II or modern prisoners, institutions. There are many, although they don't have formal markets, but there are many transactions based on monetary, goods and services exchange using a market mechanism. And from Japan, trace back to 19th century, already there were rice futures trading actively made in Dojima, Osaka. And also, right down, there is a picture I took from a Rohingya camp in Chittagong, Bangladesh, where refugees, huge number of refugees temporarily located. But even this Rohingya camp, they are lively, trading. Um, 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 we have a very abstract theorem called the first welfare theorem. Basically, if markets were functioning under a set of assumptions, laissez-faire or free market trade ultimately achieves the Pareto optimal resource allocation, meaning a best resource allocation for the society. And this is also referred to as Adam Smith's indivisible hand. So market provides a very, very strong and efficient and effective resource allocation mechanism to the human life and society. So although I started from a market is very strong, but of course, first welfare theorem is a really unrealistic theorem. First welfare theorem, we cannot talk about the poverty or income distribution or poor rich divisions. And also, in reality, market fails due to legitimate reasons. For example, insurance market is not available for many type of disasters, and public goods. There is no market for trading clean air or nature, and information is imperfect in reality. And also, like a GAFA, Google, and Amazon, etc., we see market competition is not really perfect, but monopolistic nature we can observe here and there. And also, a tendency of a positive feedback, winner takes all type of tendency in real world. So these all violates the set of assumptions leading to effective market mechanism. And in game theory, there is a representative game called the Prisoner's Dilemma game. I will refer to this Prisoner's Dilemma game or PD game is a notable example of market failure. And free trade or free decision will never achieve a socially optimal outcome. When market fails, government is supposed to at least partly correct the market failure. Having this said, actually, government also fail. Government, the entity which is supposed to correct the market, cannot really perfectly correct the market failure, and this is called the government failure. These charts, based on Japanese prefecture level data, horizontal axis is public investment or public goods investment returns. And vertical axis shows the proportion of public goods investment in each 47 prefecture. 1980s, left chart, middle chart 1980s, and right chart 2003 to 2012. We observe a negative relationship or flat relationship, meaning that government tended to allocate more public goods investment was the socially low return investment opportunities. And this really shows the obvious misallocation or inefficiency of government investment. So this chart, simple chart, shows government repeatedly failing in resource allocation in last 4 or 5 decades in Japan. So government also failed, and the government failure has been already kind of formalized by many economists, including Professor Kruger. Why government fails? Because of lack of sufficient bureaucratic capacities. Governance is not appropriate, corruption everywhere, and politicians and government ministries or director generals and
Generals,
management.
management.
I think this is howling. Is it okay? Yeah. So governments, are not necessarily maximizing social, surplus or social benefit. Rather, politicians are interested in maximizing being re-election probabilities, and ministers interested in maximizing a budget allocation. So due to these different reasons, government fails overall. Then what shall we do? Market fails and government fails, and then what shall we do? Um, Group of people 4 or 5 decades ago, since 40 years or 50 years ago, started talking about the role of community to at least partially amend market failure and state failure. And this chart is taken from late Professor Hayami's one of the papers talking about markets play a role of resource allocation through market competition and private goods allocation can be done by market. And then state play a role in providing rather bigger scale or global public goods through coercion or enforcement mechanism of government or state. Then community can play a very important role through cooperation in providing and allocating efficiently local public goods. So this trinity seems to be very important and very useful when we talk about uh, disaster resilience. And community mechanism is actually supported by so-called social capital. So there is a rich literature on social capital, which is defined as the informal forms of institution, organizations on a social relationship network, shared knowledge, mutual trust, and social norms for reciprocal arrangement, mutual help, mutual insurance, and mutual informal insurance. And actual modality of social capital ranging from village relationship or family, extended family relationship, also firms supply chain network as well as network connected through social network services such as Facebook. And Daniel Aldrich of Northeastern, Professor Daniel Aldrich of Northeastern University is one of the representative researcher on social disaster context. And he nicely classified three modalities of social capital. One is bonding social capital within a village or within community, within networks, people's relationship became tighter. That's a bonding social capital. Community A and community B's relationship build up is bridging social capital. And then neighborhood and, for example, local government relationship tighten over time. That's the linking social capital across a vertical gradient. So I think a social capital or community mechanism nicely characterized by these different modality of concept. And indeed, Daniel and myself published a book using this trinity of market, government, and community. Then talking about disaster resilience in Asia, published a book around 10 years ago. And this market state community trinity theories can be, to the best of my knowledge, can be traced back to Professor Ochi, 1980s, and then Hayami and also Samuel Bowles and Harvard Gintis, so-called radical economists from Harvard, they also explicitly talk about the role of social capital community governance 20 or so years ago. Then Daniel and myself and Dr. Social On published a book built on this trinity, talking about in the context of disaster resilience. And lately, Raghuram Rajan, leading macroeconomist from the University of Chicago, also, in order to characterize the issues in United States, he took these three Trinity mechanisms. So, in other words, market state community classification or taxonomy is not necessarily new. That's what I wanted to say. Then Trinity, how conceptually we understand this, but the issue is how we can empirically grasp or even experimentally grasp in a clean and also generate a clean evidence built on this type of analysis. So one important in order to translate how to translate these theoretical framework into a measurement, one illustration I'd like to make is experimental economics. There is experimental game called public game or trust games played by different type of individuals in community or students or village people. So many accumulated evidence about the public goods game and trust games. So these games are basically prisoner's dilemma game. And the prisoner's dilemma game, actually, I don't have time to explain fully, but prisoner's dilemma game is played by multiple, players or participants. And then each players can make a decision in order to maximize their own benefits or utility. But the ultimate outcome of prisoner dilemma game is suboptimal. And so that prisoner dilemma game. And if each person play like egoistically, then final social outcome is socially suboptimal. That's the President dilemma game. So this game is played by many different type of people. But actually, in real world, we observe prison dilemma game outcome played by a student or villagers or different type of people repeatedly showing that suboptimal theoretical outcome not really observed as a final outcome. Experimental result always deviate from the suboptimal outcome towards the social optimal. So actually letting people play public goods game and trust game, we can quantify how real world social norm or informal mutual trust or a different type of a social capital can generate a better outcome. And this is behavioral economics. This is called other regarding preferences, or other theoretical framework which explain a deviation from one-shot natural equilibrium is based on infinitely repeated game. So infinite repeated game is like a village, same set of people, even if they are super egoistic, but their relationship repeat again and again and again. Then they started playing seemingly reciprocal. Uh, so that's a game. And now there are control experiment or field experiment we can quantify in different type of community or different type of a setting to quantify this degree of mutual help or social capital by measuring actual outcome deviated from natural equilibrium. So, so these are the original setup, and then I'd like to talk about disaster resilience. So, for this audience, not to mention, disaster is a product of hazards beyond the human control, and many people talk about hazards changing due to climate change. So, how to change the hazard, exogenous hazard, is the issue of mitigation. Then exposure and vulnerability. So these are closely related with adaptation. So hazards, exposure, vulnerability can generate direct disaster losses and losses. Then this spill across space, across time. So then actually disasters, Center for Research on Epidemiological Disaster classify disasters into weather-related, climatological, hydrological, meteorological, and also non-weather-related natural hazards such as geophysical, biological, extra terrestrial, and then technological disasters. But in addition to disaster triggered by natural hazards and technological disasters, we can also incorporate economic crises like a growth collapse, hyperinflation, fiscal crisis, or currency crisis. Notably, 1997-98, the Asian financial crisis is a part of economic crisis. And also, we can additionally consider violence-related disasters from micro level domestic violence up to civil conflict and international war. Using a different type of data set, we can quantify each one country around the world. What's the average frequency of occurring each different type of different four types of disasters? So top left showing that disasters triggered by natural hazards seems to be increasing over time on average. Although many people said the CREPE paper has some data selection bias in early years. And then, technological disasters, economic crisis, and virus-related disasters, we can count the number and we can quantify the frequency. Asia and non-Asia, actually, we can clearly observe natural hazards triggered disasters happening in Asia disproportionately, and technological disasters as well. And financial crisis, we see some, sudden increase towards the end of the 1990s in Asia, but frequency of financial crisis are relatively under control in Asia if we compare with the non-Asian countries. So my mechanism, my foundation of my studies is basically different type of disasters. Now I'm classified four, and also sometimes compounded. Natural hazards, tsunami caused the technological disasters. Fukushima nuclear power plant incident is a notable compounded disaster of these two type of disaster. Ukrainian war, and after the war, of course, Ukrainian war is violence-related disasters, but because of a lack of sufficient wheat production in Ukraine, some of sub-Saharan African countries seems to be cornered to economic crisis. So that's also another compounded disasters. And COVID-19 is also compounded different type of disasters. So basic framework is these expected large-scale mega disasters, our daily life and production activities potentially facing. So against these unforeseen contingencies, how we can effectively combine market mechanism and public mechanism as well as community mechanism. So this is my basic framework. So three types of market mechanism. First, I'd like to mention insurance markets seems to fail a lot. And these charts are from based on reinsurance companies' data. I think Munich Re's data, 1980s, 2009. Damage created by natural hazard in Asia, only 9% of damage is covered by market-based insurance. So more than 90% of losses are uncovered by insurance. And that tendency seems to continue. Even middle-income countries, later years, disaster coverage is less than 10%. So this gap is a big issue. And question is why disaster insurance market fail? Actually, textbook theories really apply. Adverse selections, those who are risky people or risky company only interested in joining, insurance, then insurance contract or insurance market cannot really sustain. And the moral hazard, after covered by insurance, people's behavior and the firm's behavior change towards the more risky direction. And that also undermines the sustainability of markets-based disaster arrangement. And rare catastrophic and highly correlated big disasters, actually, it's very difficult to, for example, build up a risk model so that insurance companies can compute a fair insurance premium, or even for reinsurance company to provide the reinsurance products. So actually, textbook reason seems to be the reason behind the insurance market fail. So one example, we searched farmers' behavior before and after 2011 Ayutthaya Thai floods. As you know, 2011 Ayutthaya Thai floods are one of the largest flood happened in Thailand, and also industrial parks, especially foreign firms, Japanese firms mainly, are affected by this 2011 Ayutthaya floods. So we collected more than 800 plants information, and then our results clearly showed serious adverse selection moral hazard. So more than 800 firms data showing that Altair Patontan versus Altair AP, Altair Patontan. This is the area affected by flood, and elsewhere is a non-affected area. So if we compare this dark part, affected area, and the non-affected area, pre-disaster, pre-flood expectation or risk assessment is higher for affected, and also pre-disaster, pre-flood property insurance participation and business interruption insurance participations are disproportionately higher for those located out at Patonta. And also those who because of a flood, same tendency. And those farms inundated by flood water have the same tendency. It's like, farms expecting a flood. They are more tended to join, insurance and risk assessment was, harder for flood risk. So it's like very beautiful and very direct evidence of adverse selection. Okay, so those who are thinking or perceiving higher risk, disproportionate numbers on the insurance. Afterwards, what happened? So we can get the data, how many months it took from disaster exposure, flood exposure to resuming the operation of the production. So this duration regressed on property insurance payment and business interruption payment really positively related, even if we control for extent of losses. So this means those companies or those factories receive property insurance or business interruption insurance. They tended to, delay their resuming operation. So this is another beautiful example of moral hazard. So out of selection, moral hazard seems to be why insurance market fail. So how to do, what to do then? Actually, there are lots of innovative ideas here and there created by researchers and actual insurance sectors. One is based risk transfer program. So instead of indemnity, so moral hazard and adverse selection happens because of indemnity-based insurance. So instead of actual assessed damages, some exogenously or objectively measured risk can be linked to insurance payment. That's index-based risk transfer products. Rainfall insurance, temperature insurance, area outcomes, or even satellite-based, vegetation linked index insurance designed and implemented in private market, as well as researchers look into this. And theoretically, these products are free from adverse selection moral hazard problem. Beautiful products, theoretically. However, in already crowded literature on the index-based risk transfer experiment and empirical literature, uniformly showing people are not interested in purchasing these ideal products. So now literature trying to approach why, what's the reason behind this binding constraint. And a similar type of index-based insurance organized by at the macro level, country level. So Caribbean CREPE is earliest example, and then now African countries and Southeast Asian countries and Pacific Island countries form macro index insurance. And CCRIF, Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, they set earthquake and cyclone wind speed as exogenous index. So proper design and some catastrophe backstops if nicely designed together with the innovative data, such as objectively measured satellite imagery. I think there's a room for elaborating better insurance relatively free from adverse selection and moral hazard. Having this said, it's not perfect. So government play an important role to amend market failure. But as I said, government also failed. Um, Supporting developing countries disaster damages, we observe aid inflow to developing Asia, middle and low-income Asian countries, really dominated by yellow part, which means emergency response. So only after country or economy hit by disaster, developed countries and international organizations started providing some resources. And not much effort spent on disaster prevention and preparedness. So that also indicates how broader insurance contract or insurance arrangements fail, even government involved. And the different layers of risks. I think a combination of self-insurance by the country or household or producers, and insurance products, and then international assistance. So, but anyway, government also seems to fail. Then, what's the role of community? Actually, I put this paper by Professor Robert Townsend. Now he's teaching at MIT, titled Risk and Insurance in Village India, published in 1994. This is a little bit old article, but I think that beautifully showing that effectiveness of a community level informal mutual insurance arrangement. There are some international organization collected a long-term panel data set of Indian household. Actually, 10 years, monthly, set of same household tracked in terms of income, agriculture, or other production and consumption, labor participation, etc., etc. So this 10-year long data can be used to assess effectiveness of community insurance. So right above chart showing that 10 years, 1974 until 1984, 10 years, 30 household in the same village. And vertical axis shows the income shock. Each household income in each year, how much deviated from village level average. So this is the so-called idiosyncratic, household level shock. Idiosyncratic shock can be potentially shared through an insurance arrangement. If Tatano Sensei had a big shock and 1 year, and then at the same time I encounter some damage to my farmland, and then my income goes down, then Tatano Sensei can help me this year. But next year, I may encounter positive shock, and then Sensei may suffer from negative shock. Then opposite direction, I can help Tatano Sensei. So this mutual insurance theoretically possible if shocks are idiosyncratic. And actually, there are studies also showing that even weather-related disasters, some components are really idiosyncratic and individual specific. So potential share. And this upright chart showing that indeed lots of idiosyncrasy in the income shock. Then the final outcome of livelihood, we can measure how much each household can consume food or grain. So same chart, but now taking each household's food consumption deviated from village average. Actually, this is very flat. So comparing these two charts actually implies the existence of effective insurance or income mechanism working in this village India. Of course, in this rural community in India, there is no formal, sophisticated insurance product exists. So, social capital community level mutual help seems to generate this mapping of lots of idiosyncratic shocks people encounter, but ultimately smooth out across time and across household. So this type of analysis can be extended to a community or a prefecture, provinces, and global countries. So actually,
Mhm.
this paper, I kind of summarized existing evidence as well as some type of additional empirical analysis. So I did, and then commune level people can mutually share the idiosyncratic shock. But once catchment area of insurance widened, then sharing ratio seems to be declined systematically. But anyway, this framework also closely related with the climate economics and shocks driven by natural hazard. That's an issue related with the mitigation. And then encountering exhaustion shock, how do people share the idiosyncratic shock? That's the ex ante or ex post adaptation. Ex ante adaptation is like envisioning some type in the future, negative shock arises, people construct, market-based insurance mechanism. That's the one example of ex ante adaptation. Ex post adaptation is encountering the realization of negative shock. People mutually help each other. That's the ex post adaptation. So climate economics issues are closely related with this risk sharing or community mechanism and the market state community. Then I think 10 minutes or so, I'd like to share some evidence of my own studies. So one first evidence is Iwanuma City hit by a Great East Japan earthquake, and Iwanuma City is sitting coastal Tohoku area here. And another example is East Raglan Village, sitting in front of Raglan Bay. It's south of Metro Manila, and this village encountered out of season, very rare large-scale floods in 2012. Great East Japan earthquake hit coastal area 2011. So Yanama City is an aging community and a big tsunami, and as well as a direct earthquake hit this city. East Ragana village, relatively young and farming community and a rural developing country encounter out of season big floods. So many farmers lost the crop. Damage, actually, it's very important to grasp damage level accurately. So, Iwanuma, or whenever Japanese household or families encounter disaster damage, actually, home damage, each local government conduct a very detailed metrical survey to classify damage level. No damage, minor damage, half collapsed, or most collapsed and collapsed. So actually, certified damage level in Japan seems to be really accurate. In the Philippines, we don't have that system, but for this specific East Laguna Village farming community flood damage, we can check before and after the flooding, the satellite imagery, and then we can decode which farmlands submerged with the water. And submergence really directly connected with the loss of rice production. Okay, so we can have objective damage information based on the satellite imagery. Then we conducted a laboratory experiment to elicit prosocial behavior and a different type of a risk attitude, like a risk aversion parameter or a time domain, how people think today versus tomorrow. So discount factor, or that's a time domain parameter as a preference, we quantify after the disaster. Okay. Then one example I would like to show you. So beta is a parameter to elicit present bias. Present bias means you prefer today versus tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, onwards. Okay. If you have a particularly strong preference, if you like today much, that's the beta parameter. And the declining beta parameter means you decrease weights attached to the tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. So declining beta means you really like today. Okay. Because you really like today and current moment, you eat ice cream. Okay. And thinking, I will stop eating ice cream tomorrow and I will do some exercise tomorrow. Okay. Also, you smoke today and you drink today, thinking that tomorrow I will stop smoking. Okay. So that preference is summarized by a parameter beta. Okay. And there are experimental methods to accurately measure beta. So we devoted some resources to elicit this one. And but problem is today I smoke, thinking tomorrow I quit. 1 day later, tomorrow became today. Then you think, oh, today I smoke and I will quit smoke tomorrow. So you repeat this. And ultimately, you procrastinate, stop smoking. So that's the issue, time inconsistency issue, which can explain beautifully in the literature the gambling, smoking, and drinking, and overweight, all summarized by beta parameter. What we have found is beta parameter became strengthened. Okay, today's preference strengthened, being exposed to the disaster. Regardless of disaster type, Iwanuma earthquake or tsunami, Laguna, Philippines, it's a flood damage caused to agriculture production. We uniformly, qualitatively observe this beta. And also, a few months ago, we published another paper, a social paper in Nature Communication Psychology. Actually, this related with harmful, unhealthy behavior. In Japan, a beta decline, you prefer today, then you started eating a lot. So BMI increase and smoking increase. And so this negative coefficient all saying that your unhealthy behavior really became more salient. And Philippines, smoking and drinking became more prevalent. So actually, beta parameter seems to explain this. And also, we didn't really investigate it deeper, but beta parameter seems to be closely related with demand for disaster type insurance. We have another comparison how social capital or pro-social behavior explained by disaster exposure. And this paper compare three mechanisms: market-based insurance and the government support and private, community-level social capital. So again, Iwanuma City hit by a Great East Japan earthquake. And actually, because of this coastal community, already expecting a big earthquake coming in next 10 or 20 years. So actually, this community pre-disaster earthquake insurance, market-based earthquake insurance rate was 55%. So we can explore relative strengths of market and government and community mechanism. And also outcome, we can measure depression outcome, like a psychological situation as a summarizing, well-being measure before and after earthquake. And yeah, and then a bunch of social capital information we also corrected. Then what we have found, home damage. So suddenly you lost the home because of a big earthquake. Basically, your stress level goes up. Okay. So this is natural, and this is qualitatively the same as other previous, studies. But those who encounter home damage, but at the same time, those who already join market-based insurance, actually, this mental stress seems to be mitigated, and actually, total impact can be almost zero. Okay, in some specification. So this indicates a market-based insurance mechanisms really provide a very strong peace of mind effect. And but trust and mutual help and community attachment, social capital measure, we don't observe a similar qualitative result. So by comparing market and no-market mechanisms, actually this one study showing that the strength of a market mechanism. But what about pro-sociality? Pro-sociality also play, at least partly, the role of mitigating mental stress. So in addition to Iwanuma City, we also tracked those who evacuated from nuclear power plant tendency, and particularly Futaba town, who hosted Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. So everyone have to evacuate after the 2011 the tsunami. And we track people every another year. The latest one was actually last year. Okay. And the way we tracked was, disaster victims, everyone evacuated. So former Futaba residents are living in different communities in Japan. Now are mostly living within Fukushima Prefecture in different community. But in order to access or share information, local government office send out this newsletter regularly. So we put our questionnaire into this regular newsletter so that we can collect at least partly the information about disasters victims situation. Response rate was not so high, 16 to 20% depending on the year, but still we have some information. So comparing Iwanuma and Futaba, we found very interesting tendency. Those who are above 65 years old, Iwanuma study focusing on above 65 years old, exposure to the damage, the losing a home, making less prosocial. Prosociality is captured by number of New Year's cards. So those who encounter big shock, they cut down number of New Year's card. New Year's card is like without thinking a monetary return, you send out a greeting card to care other people. So that can be a measure of a prosociality. So about 65 years old, this is negative. And Futaba also above 65 years old, this is negative. However, below 65 years old in Futaba, this is positive, meaning that those who encounter huge damage, but relatively younger people, become more prosocial. So this shows the repeated interaction play a relatively important role for younger people. So younger people still consider future. So that's why they strengthen prosociality. On the other hand, elderly people probably they are less forward-looking, but the exposure to the disaster losses seems to play a very stronger role. And other data analysis also reconfirm this type of result. And then we did a similar type of prosociality research using Philippine flood victims, and basically the result seems to be the same. So if you encounter big losses, then you became less prosocial. But your counterpart is encountering a big shock, like Great East Japan earthquake victims or Typhoon Yolanda big earthquake, big typhoon victims. Then even flood victims became more pro-social towards the victimized people outside of your community. So pro-social behavior seems to play a role to soften the impact of uh, direct or indirect disaster losses. So then question is how to build up pro-sociality or a broader social capital. So one example is the Ibasho House in Ofunato, another community hit by earthquake and tsunami. So Ibasho House is a visitor-friendly infrastructure meeting place where any people can come and drink coffee or tea, and also jointly walk on the vegetable garden, eat ramen, and also elementary school kids can come to this Ibasho House so that older individuals can teach homeworks, etc., etc. So mutually, across the generation, they help each other. That's the infrastructure to glue people together. That's the Ibasho House concept. Then we analyze how Ibasho house infrastructure visit closely related with the feeling of recovery. So we found a very strong, correlation, arguably causal correlation between Ibasho visit and feeling of recovery. So actually, nicely designed and providing physical space seems to strengthen social capital. So Ibasho project repeated in Philippines, the area affected by Super Typhoon Yolanda of 2013. Also another Ibasho, Nepal, set up in village affected by Nepalese earthquake in 2016. And again, we collected data and we found both communities. Actually, Ibasho seems to strengthen different type of social capital. So let me wrap up. Market state community trinity seems to be core. Market is strong in some setting like Iwanuma, but market fail everywhere. So government play a very important role, but government is not really perfect. So community play a very important role. So in order to identify these different resource allocation mechanisms, actually using disaster data provide so-called quasi-experimental variation to identify causal relationship. Very helpful in terms of statistical analysis. And also theories. I don't have much time to talk about this, but theories like a static framework of a prison dilemma game versus a repeated game framework. Actually, theoretical insight also help better interpret empirical findings. And and then finally, I'd like to point out three issues. One is reinforcing or strengthening market mechanism, bringing in innovative ideas. That's very necessary. And canonical and behavioral frictions like present biasness, procrastination bias, these things needs to be mitigated in order to build resilience and insurance. Then social capital can be strengthened by designing and providing better infrastructure, which can guide human behavior. So these are the message I wanted to share today. Thank you. Thank you very much. I stop here.